Guess it's your lucky day. Provided you're good at rock, paper, scissors.
Huh?
If I win, I'll turn your Earth to dust and ember. 1, 2, throw!
Huh?
There can't be a tie. Let's try again. 1, 2, throw! And rock, paper, scissors! 1, 2, throw!
On Beerus's planet, Beerus, the god of destruction of the 7th universe, sat on his cushion on his planet, surrounded by a table laden with exotic and delicious dishes he had brought back from Earth. Earthly cuisine had become one of his great passions. Savoring each bite with a combination of pleasure and characteristic indifference, Beerus seemed relaxed. However, something was deeply troubling him. For the past few weeks, Beerus had been having disturbing dreams. Intense, vivid dreams in which he came face to face with a figure he knew all too well. His father, Beermer, the former god of destruction. Beermer was identical to Beerus and his twin brother, Champa, with one notable exception: his imposing musculature and frighteningly powerful presence. Beerus knew his father had died millennia ago, but these dreams brought back memories from long ago. Memories Beerus never knew he had. These visions repeated themselves with disconcerting frequency. Beermer appeared on the devastated battlefields, fighting a massive enemy shrouded in shadows. There was something familiar about this opponent, but Beerus couldn't quite place who or what he was. The only thing that was clear was the hatred in his eyes. "This is getting on my nerves," Beerus muttered between bites as he gazed up at the vast starry sky of his planet. Beside him, Whis, Beerus's angel and mentor, watched calmly, as always. "Is something bothering you, Lord Beerus?" Whis asked, polishing his staff with a peaceful gleam in his eyes. Beerus dropped a piece of meat onto his plate with a sigh. "Of course it is. These dreams, or rather these memories, they don't make sense. Why now? Why am I dreaming about my father? He's been dead for so long." Whis tilted his head slightly in thought and said, "Memories are curious things, Lord Beerus. They can be triggered by external forces or even unknown energies. Perhaps there is something more behind it." Beerus frowned, feeling uneasy at the idea that something was happening outside of his control. He, the god of destruction, did not like the feeling of helplessness. However, before he could respond, the air around him began to vibrate with an intense unknown energy. Whis, ever alert, raised an eyebrow as his staff glowed. It seems we have an unexpected visitor." A fissure in the fabric of space began to form in front of Beerus, and from within it emerged a tall, imposing figure. His purple skin was similar to that of Beerus and Champa, but his musculature was much more developed, and his presence carried an overwhelming weight. Beerus recognized the figure immediately, but his mind refused to believe it. "Impossible!" Beerus muttered, feeling his heart beat faster, and said, "Father, how can this be possible? How are you here?" Beermer, the former god of destruction, walked towards Beerus with a firm gaze. Beermer, with his overwhelming presence, filled the planet with an aura of power and said, "Finally, we meet again!" Whis, for his part, seemed calm but surprised. "Well, this is something I didn't expect to see. The former god of destruction of the 7th universe is still alive." Beerus stood, his body tense. "How are you alive? You died millennia ago. I witnessed it myself." Beermer smiled darkly, his eyes carrying the weight of countless ages. "You're right, I did die. But as you may have noticed from your dreams, there's more at stake than you realize. What you were seeing were not mere dreams, but memories that I left with you." "Memories?" Beerus narrowed his eyes. "Why? What are you hiding?" Beermer took a deep breath, looking up at the vast sky of Beerus's planet, as if bracing himself for a momentous revelation. "I faced a powerful enemy before my fall, a being whose race was eradicated by my hand. They were a threat to the balance of the universe, yet the last of their kind survived. They swore vengeance, not only against me, but against all creation." The air grew thick with the tension of Beermer's words, and Beerus felt a chill run down his spine. "Who is this being?" "His name is Seth," Beermer replied, his voice deep and solemn. "He was the last survivor of an ancient race that defied the rule of the gods of destruction. His strength was unmatched, and his hatred grew over the ages. I faced him and defeated him, but I did not destroy him completely. Now, he has returned, stronger and more furious than ever." Whis, who had been listening intently, interjected. "If this being is so dangerous, why didn't you destroy him completely when you had the chance?" Beermer closed his eyes for a moment, as if recalling a fatal mistake. "I underestimated his resilience. I thought he could cause no more trouble, but it seems time and hatred have fueled him in ways I didn't foresee. Beerus clenched his fists. So, those dreams, did you leave them with me so I would know he was coming back? Yes, Beerus confirmed. But I didn't expect him to return so quickly. He seeks to destroy not just you, Beerus, but all the universes. Beerus's mind was buzzing with information. He was accustomed to facing powerful enemies, but an opponent with such a grudge, and one who had already faced his father, made him uneasy. So what do we do now? Beerus asked, his voice firm and determined. Beerus looked directly at Beerus. We prepare, and we fight. This time, there will be no room for mistakes. The fate of the universes depends on it. And so father and son, two gods of destruction, found themselves united by a common cause to stop the threat that could bring absolute chaos to the multiverse. Seth's return would mark the beginning of a new and terrible battle, one that would go beyond the power of a single god of destruction. Beerus watched Beerus with a penetrating gaze, as if he were assessing every aspect of his son's power. The tension between the two was palpable, and Whis, standing nearby, sensed that something was about to happen. "You are not ready, Beerus," Beerus declared with a coldness that cut through the air. "What lies ahead is not something you can face in your current state." Beerus, known for his pride and fiery temper, did not take these words lightly. "How dare you underestimate me, father? I am the god of destruction of the seventh universe. I have faced formidable enemies and emerged victorious." Beerus took a step forward, his oppressive presence growing. "Do you think your title makes you invincible? Do not mistake your status for absolute power." His deep voice echoed, filled with authority. "Do you want to prove that you are ready? Then fight me here and now." Whis took a few steps back, watching the exchange with interest. He knew that this duel was not just a show of physical strength, but a battle of wills between two gods. Beerus hesitated for a moment, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Very well," he said, assuming his fighting stance, his eyes burning with determination. "Let's see who's underestimating who." In an instant, the battlefield was set. Beerus stood still while Beerus charged forward in a burst of speed. The impact of their blows echoed across the planet, the air vibrating with the destructive energy of both. However, the difference in power between them soon became apparent. Every attack Beerus made, no matter how powerful, was blocked with ease by Beerus. The former god of destruction moved with terrifying grace, dodging blows and counter-attacking with brutal precision. Before long, Beerus began to feel the weight of the fight. His breathing quickened and his muscles burned with exertion, while Beerus didn't even seem to pant. "Is that all?" Beerus asked with a hint of disappointment in his voice, dodging yet another punch. "You're far from ready, Beerus." Before Beerus could react, Beerus delivered a devastating blow to his son's abdomen, sending him flying meters away. Beerus fell heavily to the ground, his body aching and humiliated. He tried to get up, but his limbs were shaking. Beerus walked slowly toward him without a hint of arrogance. "You have potential, Beerus, but you're stuck in your complacency. You're strong, yes, but not strong enough for what's to come." Beerus, panting and with his pride wounded, looked at his father. "So what do you suggest?" Beerus held out his hand, helping Beerus to his feet. "I'll train you the way I should have from the beginning. We have no time to waste. Seth is approaching, and he won't come alone." Whis, who had watched the battle in silence, smiled slightly. "It seems interesting times lie ahead." Beerus stared out at the vast horizon, feeling a mixture of anger and determination in his heart. He didn't like being defeated, least of all by his own father, but something inside him knew that Beerus was right. Seth was a threat unlike anything he had ever faced. "Let's begin then," Beerus said, his eyes burning with new conviction. The training for the war against Seth had begun, on Beerus's planet. After weeks of arduous training in a special dimension created by Whis, Beerus and Beerus returned to the universe with a power they had never imagined they possessed. The dimension, isolated from any outside interference, forced them to explore their limits, test their abilities, and most importantly, overcome their weaknesses. The training was brutal, and Whis, ever vigilant, made sure that the gravitational field and the density of the space around them increased with each session. With each battle, Beerus felt his strength amplify, and alongside his father, he finally understood the true potential he carried within himself. After weeks that seemed like an eternity, the two gods emerged from the dimension with a different aura. Beerus was no longer the same. His confidence, which had previously bordered on arrogance, was now anchored in genuine power, tempered by a humility acquired with each blow suffered at the hands of his father. Beermer, on the other hand, seemed calmer, as if training with Beerus had awakened something in him as well. Perhaps the notion that, after so much time, he was no longer alone in this fight. But the peace would not last long. The time for war had come. Seth, Beermer's ancient enemy, had resurfaced, as predicted. He was not alone. Over the ages, he had gathered a legion of followers and survivors of worlds destroyed by the gods of destruction, individuals who yearned for revenge against what they saw as divine tyranny. His allies were powerful, many of whom possessed unique abilities capable of challenging even the most experienced gods. But now, Beerus and Beermer were not the same as those Seth had faced in the past. When the war began, Beerus did not hesitate. With relentless focus, he advanced to face Seth's allies, leaving behind any trace of doubt that might have existed. Each of his opponents underestimated his power, believing that his strength was merely a result of his title as the god of destruction. But what they did not know was that Beerus had surpassed even those expectations. Using Hakai, the ultimate technique of destruction, he quickly eliminated each of them, permanently erasing their existence from reality. Every strike, every move was precise, and chaos spread among his enemies as they fell, one by one. The battle was not only physical but also psychological. Beerus's fury, combined with his newfound clarity of purpose, made him unstoppable. The universe seemed to vibrate to the rhythm of his destruction, and those who had previously challenged him soon realized that there was no room for mercy. Beerus's Hakai was absolute, and his enemies disappeared like dust in the wind. By eliminating each of Seth's allies, Beerus knew he was clearing the board, but the real showdown was yet to come. Across the battlefield, Beermer faced Seth, the being he had once underestimated, the last survivor of a race that had dared to defy the gods of destruction. Seth was immense, cloaked in a dark energy that seemed to devour everything around him. His power had grown exponentially since his last encounter with Beermer, and the hatred in his eyes burned with an intensity that threatened to consume the very fabric of reality. But strangely, as the confrontation intensified, Beerus, watching from afar, noticed something alarming. Beermer was hesitating. His blows, though powerful, did not carry the intent of final destruction. The former god of destruction seemed to hold back, as if reluctant to deliver the final blow to Seth. Beerus did not understand the reason for this hesitation, but he knew that any hesitation could cost him dearly. Seth, in turn, took advantage of every opening, counterattacking with a fury accumulated over the ages. Beerus, with his blood still boiling from the previous battle, could not watch passively. He had no time for doubts or regrets. Seeing that Beermer would not finish the fight, Beerus advanced with unwavering determination. Upon reaching the battlefield where his father fought Seth, he did not exchange a word. The look in his eyes said it all. There was no room for hesitation, not this time. Beerus raised his hand, the energy of Hakai pulsing through his fingers. Seth, aware of the danger, tried to defend himself, but it was too late. With a single gesture, Beerus uttered the word that would seal his enemy's fate. Hakai. The destructive energy enveloped Seth in an instant, erasing his existence from reality. There was no explosion, no grand spectacle, only a deathly silence. The kind of silence that accompanies the end of an era. Seth, the threat that had lasted for millennia, was disintegrated into nothingness. The universe was finally free of his hatred. Beerus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the war finally lift. He looked at his father, Beermer, who was on his knees, exhausted and wounded. The battle had taken its toll on both of them, but especially on Beermer, who seemed to carry an emotional burden in addition to his physical wounds. He slowly stood up, his strength nearly exhausted, and looked at Beerus, a mixture of pride and sadness in his eyes. "You did what I could not," Beermer said, his voice low but full of meaning. "Seth deserved to be destroyed, but I hesitated. Maybe out of guilt, maybe because in the end I knew he was the result of my mistakes." Beerus, usually known for his lack of patience, offered no words of comfort. He simply nodded. "It's over," he replied, his voice firm but not arrogant. "Now it's time for us to go." With the help of Whis, who appeared beside them with his usual enigmatic smile, the two gods of destruction returned to Beerus's planet. The battlefield was behind them, but the scars of war remained on both of them. Beermer, in particular, was badly injured. His body had suffered more than he cared to admit, but his spirit seemed lighter, as if the battle had finally given him some kind of redemption. The silence contrasted with the violence of the war they had waged, and for a brief moment there was a sense of peace. However, they both knew that, although Seth was destroyed, destroyed. The balance of the universe remained fragile, and new threats could emerge at any moment. After days of rest on the planet of the 7th universe, Beerus and Beerus were recovering from the wounds left by the war against Seth. However, the silence between them was thick, full of unexpressed thoughts and unresolved emotions. While Whis, as usual, watched everything with his serene smile, Beerus felt that there was something more that needed to be said between him and his father. One night, as they gazed up at the vast starry sky, Beerus decided to break the silence. "You hesitated when you faced Seth." His voice was firm, but without its usual accusatory tone. "If I hadn't intervened, this war might have ended differently." Beerus sighed, his normally imposing posture seeming more relaxed, almost vulnerable. "You're right," he admitted, looking out over the horizon. "I hesitated, Beerus. The moment I looked at Seth, I remembered why your race was destroyed, and it wasn't because of any real threat, but because of a fear I didn't want to admit." Beerus frowned, puzzled. "Fear?" "Yes." Beerus kept his eyes fixed on the stars, his voice thick with guilt. "I saw their potential, their strength, their ambition, and I feared that if left to grow, they might one day rival the gods of destruction. So I eliminated them. Seth was the last of his kind, and the hatred he carried was a reflection of my own mistakes. He fought not only for revenge, but for the memory of a people I had erased." Silence hung between them for a few moments. Beerus felt a slight pang of empathy for his father, something he rarely felt for anyone. Their relationship had always been complex, but now he understood that even gods carried their own burdens. "So why are you still here? You died millennia ago. How is it that you're still out there?" Beerus asked, his voice softer, but more direct. Beerus gave a tired smile. "I am alive, but not completely. When I was defeated, I sealed myself in a dimension outside of time, where I remained in an undead state. I could not be completely destroyed, but I was not truly alive either. It was only with Seth's return and the memories I left in you that I was able to leave." Beerus remained silent, absorbing those words. It was strange to think that his father, someone he believed to be dead, had remained in some kind of purgatory for so long. After a few moments, Beerus slowly stood up. "I need to leave, Beerus." "Where are you going?" Beerus asked, not looking directly at him. Beerus smiled enigmatically, the way Whis used to. "I have things to attend to, places to visit. Maybe it's time to meet my true end, or maybe I'll find a new path. But that's not something you need to know right now." Without waiting for an answer, Beerus began walking away, his footprints disappearing into the emptiness of the planet. He didn't look back. Beerus watched in silence, respecting his father's decision. He felt that this time, the farewell was final. Whis, who had been watching the scene calmly, approached Beerus. "Are you going to be okay, Lord Beerus?" Beerus sighed and crossed his arms. "Yes. Now that he's gone, there's peace, at least for now." As Beerus disappeared into the vastness of the universe, Beerus knew that despite everything, his destiny was no longer tied to the past. New battles would come, and he would be prepared for them. Guys, this is how we end our story. Did you enjoy meeting Beerus's father? Who is more powerful, Beerus or Beerus? I commented, I want to see who will win. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye!